Welcome to the academic conference, Safeguarding Press Freedom in the Midst of Journalism and Security, Perspectives from Academia, which is being held in the framework of the commemoration of World Press Freedom Day led by UNESCO 2024, whose venue this year is Santiago de Chile. On behalf of the host universities of this event, la Universidad de Chile and Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, we welcome you. We are going to start the panel titled Consequences of Traumatic Events on Journalism Practice 1, because there's also that part 2, for which we have 4 presentations. Each presentation will last a maximum of 10 minutes. I will let the presenters know when they have 3 and 1 minutes left and when they should finish their presentation. We are going to begin with the presentation entitled Coping with the Perils of Investigative Journalism, an analysis of Manasseh Assur Awuni's experiences. Did I say that right? Yes?
Exactly.
Yes, okay. This presentation is brought to you by Esme Amoa Aua from the University of Education in Winneba and Elizabeth Owusu Asiama from the University of Education in Winneba and will be presented by Esme. Right?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to start sharing my screen now.
All right. Thank you, Valkyria. As already said, my name is Esme. My co-authors are Elizabeth and Gifty. Next, please. This event is let's go to the next slide. Yeah. This event is, for me, it's a reminder of the vital role that investigative journalists play in our society by trying to kick out corruption within our societies. And in doing this, they have to delve deep into the shadows to bring out the truth that is deliberately being concealed, usually by people in power. Now, in their quest to achieve their goals, they are unfortunately being encountered with terrible life-threatening risk, which includes the physical attacks, undue arrest, and the worst of it is the outright murders. And this is causing some journalists to quit the profession, and others don't even want to venture into it at all. Now, despite the next slide, please. Now, despite the perilous state of investigative journalist safety in Ghana, there are still some journalists who are practicing and even thriving in the profession. And an example is Manasseh Assur Awuni, who is one of the very few investigative journalists in Ghana. So for these people to keep thriving or practicing within those treacherous terrains, it is prudent that we investigate the kind of perils that they encounter and how they manage to cope with these perils. Now, when we look into the literature, a number of studies have addressed the journalism profession. Next slide, please. Now, in the Western context, we realized that there are a lot of scholarly published studies on the rising dangers of the journalism profession, which includes the investigative journalism. And these studies have also focused on the coping strategies. An example is Vanikova and Hanikova 2021, Masood 2017. And then when we look at the literature in the African context, we realize that there are so many scholarly studies on the rising dangers of the journalism profession in general. And so, and then some of these also looked at the coping strategies. But then when it comes to studies on investigative journalism, we realize that they are quite few, and these few focused mostly on the dangers of the profession. Now, next slide, please. Now, in the Ghanaian context too, we have studies on the dangers of the journalism profession in general. And an example is the study of Dr. Apiaje 2020, and then Nyako and Apojivi 2017. Now, the investigative journalism studies which are very few, focused also on, issues that are far from the coping strategies. So the truth is, while so much attention has been given and established in literature of the rising dangers associated with investigative journalism, studies on how the professionals are coping with these challenges seem inadequate. Now, empirical studies also on these coping strategies adapted by the professionals who are practicing here in Ghana appear non-existent. And so this study investigates how Manasseh Azuri Awuni copes with the perils that are associated with his practice by engaging him in a narrative inquiry. Next slide, please. Now, the study is guided by three main research objectives, which are to explore the challenges faced by investigative journalist Manasseh, two, to investigate the strategies that Manasseh uses to cope with the associated dangers of his practice, and then three is to examine how Manasseh's coping strategies have shaped his professional output. We further change these into questions. Next slide, please. We further change this into research questions, and then the study is underpinned by the transactional model of stress and coping, which, based on the stress and the stressor concept, comes with several assumptions. But generally, this model assumes that individuals constantly interact with their environment, and the result of their interaction is that they are confronted with one challenge or the other. And next slide, please. Now, for our research approach, we use the qualitative approach. For research design, we use the narrative inquiry, sampling technique, purposive, sample size, Manasseh Azuri Awuni, and 6 documentary evidence. Data collection method, we use the interviews and document analysis. Data analysis, we use the thematic analysis. Next slide, please. Now, based on the application of the transactional model of stress and coping, the study found that Manasseh Awuni faced security, professional, political, and health challenges. And these are the stresses that he is confronted with. And based on looking at the literature, we realize that there are some of these challenges that have also been established by other scholars in their studies. So, for example, when we look at the security challenge, we realize that a study like, for example, Ivankova and Hanikova's study in 2021 looked at the impact of the murder of an investigative journalist and his fiancée on the investigative journalist committee. And we realized that they have established that investigative journalists do not only suffer their perils alone, but their families and friends, people close to them, are also at risk, as this investigative journalist in Slovakia was murdered alongside his fiancée. Now, on the other hand, there are some of the security challenges that are peculiar or pertain to Manasseh alone. We found that Manasseh encounters setups and entrapments to tarnish his image within the country, Ghana, as an investigative journalist. And when we also...
3 more minutes.
When we look at the health challenge, we realize that Manasseh Azuri encountered, aside the fact that he has to undergo so much stress looking for credible information and also to get his stories together, he also is always confronted with how safe he is at each point in time. And this puts so much stress on his mental health. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right. So, in applying the transactional model of stress and coping, we also found that Manasseh developed coping strategies with which he counters his stresses. And these include the personal strategy, the support system strategy, the out of the eye of the storm, and then the avoidance strategy. So we realized that with the avoidance and restrictive strategy, a scholar like Monteiro and Pinto, 2017, have established that even Portuguese journalists also adapt these this form of strategy to counter their perils. And then when we look at the personal security strategy, we realize that Manasseh invested in CCTVs, electric fencing, and then motion sensors to protect his family and his property. And this wasn't found during the literature review, so it appears it is unique to Manasseh. Next slide, please. All right. Then finally, we also found, based on the transactional model of stress and coping, which emphasizes the transactional nature of stress and coping, and also allows that you assess the performance of the professional. We found out that the implication of Manasseh's coping strategies on his output were the reduction in his output and also the maintenance of resilience. Then we realized that with the reduction in output, when we look at assertions by Sonetag and Fritz 2015, they have asserted that once the right coping strategies are adapted, the result should be positive, which doesn't fall in line with what is happening in Manasseh's case. Manasseh's coping strategies are good. They are good for his safety, but he has experienced a negative output of reduction in his output. So if he has to present about 3 reports in 3 months, he's able to present just 1 or 2. Then we also realized that maintenance of resilience aligns with most of the scholars. Somebody like Sanderson 2022 agrees with what Manasseh said, that once you, even though stress is debilitating, once you apply the coping strategies, you are bound to perform well, and then it enforces resilience. Next slide, please. So the study concludes that investigative journalism is indeed a perilous profession, because the findings are no different from this assertion. Now, based on Manasseh's stresses that he faces, he does not quit the profession, but he develops strategies for himself and with which he thrives within the terrain. Then finally, the implications of his coping strategies came in twofolds: positive and negative. Positive, in the sense that he's able to maintain resilience with his strategies, and negative in the sense that his production or his output is considerably reduced. Next slide, please. Now, the study recommends that media organizations and journalist associations should provide psychological support services for investigative journalists and encourage self-care among these journalists. It also proposes that media organizations and associations should push for reforms to strengthen legal protection for investigative journalists and also promote press freedom here in Ghana. And then finally, the study recommends that media organizations should invest in training programs and capacity building programs that will equip investigative journalists with the necessary skills and knowledge to navigate their perils and enable them to maintain resilience as experienced by Manasseh. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Esme, for your presentation. It was very enlightening, and I'm definitely looking forward to learn more about the Ghanaian news environment, so I can actually have some more knowledge to apply to my context. Now we will hear the presentation entitled Risks and Dangers of Reporting the Boko Haram Terror Group in Nigeria, Matters Arising, by Laurato Umar Abdul Salam from the University of Abuja and Umaru Pate from the Federal University of Kashmir. And the presentation will be brought to you by Laurato Abdul Salam. I will start the presentation right now. Laurato, are you with me? Can you hear us? Hello? Hello? Can you test your microphone, please?
Hello, can you?
Hi, I can hear you. I'm going to start sharing my screen right now.
Thank you very much. And good day to everyone. The risks and danger of reporting the Boko Haram terror group in Nigeria matter. As you know, the Nigerian media space so hostile, in fact, suffocating to some journalists. Face of journalism in Nigeria, and that's because the Boko Haram experience has thrown incidents became like a new development to Nigerian journalists.
Rato, I think your internet connection is not so stable. I don't know if you want me to pass the slides, and we also cannot hear you right now.
The next slide. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you.
Yes. It's much more fluent right now, the connection.
In Nigeria, like I said.
All right.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so the Nigerian media space is actually shrinking as a result of the experience of the Boko Haram incidents in the country. And in fact, some journalists feel journalism is actually suffocating because of the experiences of in Nigeria. And so the outbreak of Boko Haram insurgency caught many by surprise. Incidents of Boko Haram paid the ultimate price. And in this case, some were actually forced to leave the country. And dangers of reporting Boko Haram incidents, and also to understand the mechanism that the journalists deploy Haram incidents. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Okay, and so the significance of the study is to the kind of strategy or the mechanism that our journalists in Nigeria. Slide, you've gone too far. Can we go back to the significance? And so the significance, Valkyrie, you have just gone further to understand the experience of our journalists, the survival mechanism that they adopted. And the finding of this study is actually to inform other journalists or will-be journalists, and so that when they are faced with this the country or regions, they are able to use those kind of strategies that journalists use. And so the study may form the basis for advocacy to the government of Nigeria for the formulation of a legal framework of journalists in Nigeria. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so what is the research method that we use The study is qualitative and focus group discussion. Participants were actually drawn from media executive, insurgency in the Northeast Nigeria. We interviewed bureau chiefs and media owners, and you might ask, control the media. They are the ones that send journalists outside. And so we thought to understand what are the kind of strategies that they use to also reach out to the regulatory bodies and professional association just to understand their role and to also confirm some of the things that, of course, we experienced during the Boko Haram incidents. And open-ended questions were used to understand the experience and the new institutional opinion for this study. And this is so because studying the interaction of journalism and safety of organization at an institutional level will help us, to confirm and to also help support the kind of work that the government of Nigeria will want to do with the safety of journalists in the country. Can we move to the next slide, please? And some of the key findings are things that we want to journalists in Nigeria who have received training in journalism and mass communication from different 113 institutions, university and tertiary and polytechnics, but you'll be surprised to know that most of the students that graduated from this department mass communication, journalism, but the curriculum of many of these universities treated journalism safety. Never see a journalist that has gone through the 4 years tell you that, yes, I know what safety of journalists is, and I know there were empirical evidence also that shows a Nigerian media organization do not and journalists covering the insurgency were on how to navigate coastal environment as presented by incidents. Can we move to the next slide, please? And some of them, and this is another key findings again, understand the dynamics of the complex nature of the Northeast and how to cover the Boko Haram incidents. And so it becomes very difficult for them to the journalists that were reporting from. And the Newspaper Proprietors Association and even the executive unanimously agreed that they have not taken any substantive strategy that will actually help journalists in Nigeria. And so we also observe that professional association initiative regarding journalists in the country is notably absent. Can we move to the next?
Yes. Lorato, you have 3 more minutes.
All right. The reason behind this in Nigeria, nature of reporting, can you hear me?
I can. I have stopped hearing you for like a minute. So if you can please just start again with this.
Okay. The nature of reporting and assumed priority given to the military victory over the insurgency actually triggered some attacks. And some of the attacks were actually caused by the nomenclatures, by the journalists cannot call the Boko Haram Boko Haram. If they call them like that in their report, those kind of names can actually call for attacks of Boko Haram only prefer to be called Jama'at al-Ahli Sunnah Leader Awati Jihad instead of the Boko Haram, which is, the name that everybody call the Boko Haram or the terrorists indeed. And then the third one is that also insecurity, different threats to unleash mayhem to journalists. We have had a lot of stories about women journalists that were attacked by the military other few media organizations provided post-assignment warfare. There were no supports. Participant journalists confirmed that media organizations in Nigeria do not care about the trauma that they pass care of themselves. So when they have mental issue as a result of coverage of Boko Haram, these journalists find themselves taking care of themselves. Strategy by journalists covering Boko Haram. The journalists in the Northeast also organize themselves as a united front. These are the survival strategies that they adopted front in their chapel. These are information about hotspots. Relocation was also one of the things that the journalists in Nigeria resulted in doing. They also try to build trust among themselves so that they can stay alive. Taking care of the Boko Haram family, so just so that they can survive. This is a graph that really typically shows what has been happening in the country. 20-something years, Nigeria has never had a clean slate of especially within the last 5 years, that is 2019 to 2020. That have been attacked has actually significantly increased for this. We're just in the last 4-5 months now, so we can see that the attack on journalists has increased. It shows, therefore, that even the effort that academicians and professionals, we have not seen any results, and journalists are being attacked every now and then. Can we move to the next? And future direction and recommendation, I would like to go through that. Organization should include safety protocols and hostile environment awareness techniques. They should also provide manual for covering conflict. Because at this moment, we don't have anything like that in our institution. And if you go to the media organization, it's the same thing as well. Journalist Safety Commission should be established to ensure safety of journalists and maintain a for our journalists. And the commission should offer legal and psychological support for at-risk journalists in collaboration with relevant professional bodies, like Nigerian Bar Association, for instance. The Nigerian trying to cover dangerous beats should be provided with incident reporting manual. Our media organization have really confirmed that they do not have anything that has to do with incident manual. Life insurance is in Nigeria. The next slide, conclusion, I would like to go. This paper established that journalists that cover the insurgency did not receive prior or hostile environment training before deployment. Journalist attacks were facilitated by media law and regulation. Journalists devised unconventional methods to survive the insurgency and attack. To survive the insurgent, catering for the family of the insurgents as a survival strategy. Important aspect of journalism that must be given priority, considering the challenges facing Nigerian journalists, even at this end of my presentation. I'd like to go over to Valkyrie. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Now we will pass to hear the presentation entitled Journalism Safety in Conflict Zones, the Case of Israel-Gaza War by Rasha El Ibiari from the American University in Cairo. Rasha, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, how are you doing? I'm going to
Okay.
start presenting your slides in my screen. You can let me know when you want me to
All
change the
right,
slide.
so can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So this research is still ongoing. It's not yet finalized research, so I'm sharing with you basically some of the initial findings. And it's addressing journalist safety in conflict zones with special focus on the case of the Gaza war taking place just across borders from Egypt. And basically, it's also a part of the project related to Sheffield University, where I am a regional co-lead with the Safety of Journalism Research Network, with my colleague attending now, Professor Miral Al-Ashri. So please turn to the following slides, please. Okay, so I'll just start by giving you some background on the conflict that you are probably also oriented to it nowadays. It started in October 7 when Hamas militant group launched the Tufan al-Aqsa attack on Israel, on which is the largest single day casualties in the Israeli history were recorded, describing the Hamas attack as unprecedented. In response, then, a fully mobilized attacks into the densely populated Gaza Strip have taken place, committing acts of violence that violates international law through indiscriminate bombing of Gaza and through deadly airstrikes and illegal weapons, bombing hospitals and refugee camps, killing more than 34,000 Palestinians to date, according to CPG. Please, please turn the slide. Okay, among those who were killed, there are 97 journalists and media workers who died. 16 journalists were reported injured, 4 journalists missing, and 25 journalists arrested. This is in addition to multiple assaults and threats and cyber attacks and censorship, and also killing of family members of journalists. Sorry. This is according to CPG in the 1st of May. Please turn the slide.
All right. If you need a pause to drink some water or anything, just let me know.
Well, I think I'm fine. Okay, I'll just go on. Okay. So journalist safety in wartime. So since the Gaza war began, journalists have been paying the highest price, their lives, to defend our right to the truth. Each time a journalist dies or injured, he loses a fragment of that truth. We lose this truth that is right of all of us. So journalists are civilians, and they should be protected by international humanitarian law in times of conflict. And those who are responsible for their death should face trials, two trials actually, one under international law and another one under the history, unforgiving their crimes. This is also according to Carlos Martinez, the CPG program director in New York. Next slide, please. So the research goal and method that I have used in this research is that it aims to investigate through in-depth interviews with professionals, researchers, and human rights specialists from international IOs and NGOs. It tries to find out those important research questions like how to protect journalists in conflict zones, what is the role of international IOs such as the EU or NGOs such as the CPG, what is the role, what they should do to protect journalists, and what is the role of the international law, of course, international humanitarian law. Next slide, please. So the initial interviews were conducted with Rana Sabagh, the senior editor of MENA OCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, Hussein Al-Waeli, the EU accredited journalist, and Professor Miral Sabri, professor at the American University in Cairo, and also regional co-lead with me in the Journalism Safety Research Network at Sheffield University. Next slide, please. So the initial research findings that we came up with after interviewing those people, according to Rana Sabbagh, Committee to Protect Journalism, they have done amazing job in reporting about journalists. However, reported names of journalism, their location, how they died, and the incident. However, at her organization, which is an NGO also, they had hard time talking to journalists in Gaza. They are themselves displaced. The internet connection is cut every day, and many of them and their family members have died. So the biggest problem is how to protect journalists who are independent. Basically, those who have a media, usually the media defends them. However, those who are independent basically have a problem getting any protection. So they are doing a great job reporting on social media despite the obstacle of the inhuman situation in which they live. However, there is no Al Jazeera or Al Arabiya network or a big media organization to protect them. Next slide, please. So Sabbagh was also very concerned about how the Western media reports on Gaza from the Israeli viewpoint, as they have no access to Gaza, and the only option is to embed their journalists with the Israeli army. So Israel has indiscriminately bombed all civilians, all media houses, targeted journalists to stop the truth from being reported. So it is still, yet it is still being reported despite all of this. And she also said that Western governments such as Sweden, Holland, Denmark, they also stopped funding Palestinian media such as Watan, for example, independent media or local Palestinian media. And this did not happen, for example, if you compare to the Russian-Ukraine war, Palestine has exposed the ugliness of those Western governments and their media bias. So next slide, please. So also regarding the safety of journalists operating in the Gaza Strip during the conflict, also Hussein Al-Waili, he said that the Israelis don't care about safety of journalists inside Gaza. They don't want anybody to witness what is happening. Thanks to social media, journalists and citizens in Gaza are reporting it. So what happened is worse than what happened in the World War, as he described. So as for the risks and challenges that journalists in Gaza face while covering the conflict, especially during the ground assault, he said that there is no protection for journalists, unfortunately, whatsoever. Israel targets everyone, and there is no protection from international organizations whatsoever, and there should be some respect to international law, of course. Next slide, please.
Yes, you have 3 more minutes.
Okay, okay, I'll be quick. So according to Professor Miral Sabri, there should be some respect to international law. No one respects international law, and this is not an equal conflict. There are more than 97 journalists killed in 3 months. There must be some respect to international law, application of the rules of war, respect journalists and letting them do their work. Not respecting international laws and opens the way for countries such as South Africa to file case to the International Court of Justice, ICJ. Next. So as for the EU role protecting journalists, for example, it's difficult to do anything for journalists. The EU can condemn, for example, however, this doesn't help journalists. They negotiate with Israel and Egypt to resolve the conflict. For example, the EU also played indirect role by training journalists in Gaza so that they can do the online social media coverage that they are doing very well nowadays. Thank God. Next slide, please. Next, yeah. So the EU leaders, they called for ceasefire many times to protect journalists, but no one is listening to them. It's very difficult to create a strategy to protect journalists through IOs. There are negotiations between EU countries to try to solve the conflict, protect civilians. The big player, however, remains Israel, unfortunately. The EU called many times for the protection of journalists, and there need to be some pressure on the ICJ to protect journalists and to try to do something. Next, please. In conclusion, we concluded that there should be clear measures that forces countries at war to protect journalists' safety. Citizens' mass killing is a violation of international law and should not go unpunished. Unbalanced and unethical media coverage should be stopped. International law must be respected by all countries, especially UN Security Council members, and IOs such as the EU should respect international law and stop supporting countries committing genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rasha, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Now we will pass to the presentation, Safety and Challenges of Journalism in the Conflict-Prone Countries, in the case of Ethiopia, by Mulatu Alemayehu Borges from Oslo Med University. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. I'm going to start presenting right now, and the floor is all yours.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm now in Oslo, and I'm presenting the findings of a research that I've done in Ethiopia. I'm originally from Ethiopia, but currently I'm working at Oslo Met University as an associate professor of journalism. So though I'm working in Oslo, my data and my research entirely focused on Ethiopia. Next slide, please. Yes, my interest in this research is just to investigate how journalism or journalists in general in Ethiopia have been practicing their profession in the current situations, and how the entire political environment, which is in most cases volatile, sometimes unstable, and there are lots of political tensions. And in that context, how journalists are working, how they are practicing their profession. And the other one, in this case, in times of crisis, how the safety of the journalists are really ensured. Are they really free, or are they a victim for any kinds of attack coming from different corners? Next slide, please. Yes, just to put just to give you some background information about Ethiopia. You know, Ethiopia, it is, it's in the Horn of Africa, in East Africa, with a population of 120 million. And the political situation in the country is, as I mentioned earlier, it's so volatile. There was a good incidence in the country. In 2018, a new government, I can't say new government, instead, there was a kind of transition government which had a transformative ideology. And because of this leadership, we have seen lots of changes and chances in the Ethiopian media, as well as in the Ethiopian politics. Then we have seen lots of changes on the media laws. For instance, this government, the new government, which came to power in 2018, they tabled different media laws which were very draconian and that were culminating people and the journalists from expressing their free ideas in the media. Then, in the first time in the history of Ethiopia, the media policy was implemented in 2021. The open media environment, I'm so sorry, just
I'm guessing you had a technical issue, but we'll wait until you come back. Just a second.
yeah. So the media policy was blessed in the first time in the country, and because of these things, even Ethiopia was awarded so many so many things. For instance, the 2019 World Press Day was celebrated in Ethiopia because of lots of changes in the country. However, soon after 2018, 2019, I can't say that the country has been in a good situations. I know that there is a serious conflict in Israel and Gaza. I know that a serious conflict in Russia and Ukraine and some other places. However, severe conflicts have been going on in Ethiopia, in many parts of Ethiopia. In fact, these conflicts have been covered because of the war in Israel and Palestinian, at the same time Russia and Ukraine. But many people are currently killed in Ethiopia. Many people have been displaced in their in their home areas. Mob actions have been taken in many parts of the country, and as a result of this, I can say that journalists are becoming so volatile. The next slide, please. Yes, in order to see how the journalists are really working in such conflict countries. For instance, the political situation is not stable, the security is not stable, the economic situation is not stable. Then how they are going to work their profession? Then I designed to instruments. I mean, I used qualitative and quantitative research approach, and I've selected 4 big regional states. That means these regional states, almost 70% of the total population are living in these 4 regional states, as well as 2 city administrations. In these 4 regional states and 2 city administrations, almost these are the center of the politics, and many media organizations and journalists are working from this area. So I just targeted these regional states and 2 city administrations, and I have interviewed close to more than 30 journalists, editors, activists, politicians who have good understanding about the current media and political situations. At the same time, I circulated, questionnaire which is designed to answer those questions, and 164 journalists filled the questionnaires, and this is processed by using SPSS. But the qualitative data collected through in-depth interview was transcribed, then processed by using Atlas T-Sum, which is a very important tool to analyze the qualitative data. Now, the next slide, please. Yes, what is the result? Then, from the quantitative data, how journalists are really working free from the current political environment, or how the current political environment is really very conducive to the Ethiopian journalists, then almost 65% of the journalists confirmed that the current environment, the current political environment is not very conducive for them. They strongly disagree that the current condition is not very good for the journalists, and almost close to 10%, they don't have idea. That means, they are even in a certain frustration to answer the questions, but the only 3% of the journalists, they said, the media situation, the political environment in the current condition is very good. They can say. The next slide, please. Yes, do journalists and other people who are forwarding their views to the government or the ruling parties, are they really free, or are they going to face some forms of human rights violation because of their ideas? Then most of the journalists confirm that, not most, 95% of the journalists strongly agreed or confirmed that those people who are really willing to talk through any media platform, either always or sometimes face harassment from the government and the other security apparatus. Almost 95%, more than 95%. Only less than 4% said no, people do not face any kinds of harassment. By the way, we can link the first slide with this one. In the first slide, those journalists who are are strongly arguing that the media environment is good at this moment. And these 6 people, that means 3.66 respondents confirmed that people are not facing any kinds of threat. So we can link from different contexts. So these people might be people who are politically assigned or who are working in favor of the current political situations. The next slide, please.
All right, you have 3 more minutes.
All right. Then the extent of journalists facing pressure, well, how about they themselves? Are they really free to practice? Then the same result was seen. More than 95% of the journalists, they are working in a clear fear. And that means they are either always or sometimes they faced pressure in one way or the other way. Either they are pressurized in the form of harassment, arrest, some kinds of demotion, or in a different way. So they confirm that it's not a safe environment. Next slide, please. How about the qualitative data? Next slide. Then the qualitative data indicated that, from more than 30 informants, we have found 3 different views. The first one said that, no, the current media situation is really very comfortable and journalists are free to practice their profession. I accept some laws. There is no limitation to practice their profession. So this is the first group. Next slide. The second group is, well, there is some forms of change. There is a U-turn. In the first 2 years, it was excellent. We have seen lots of good laws, good initiatives from the government, and the media platform has seen some forms of good environment. However, after a while, it is turned to worst scenario. So even these people they include ideas. For instance, some media organizations, the media were operating outside Ethiopia, and they were strong enough to send their comments against the government. Then these media were invited to operationalize from Addis. So these people, these media organizations, are systematically invited to come to Ethiopia to be weakened and to lose their independent status. Next slide, please. The third category said, well, even though the government was a very pretentious state, so we haven't seen any kinds of change. Even this period is the worst period in the country. Journalists are not free to report issues. Journalists are labeled or categorized based on their ethnicity, religion, and political ideology, and sometimes because based on the area that you are living. So it is impossible. It is not possible to say that journalism and its practice has seen a good environment in the current situations. Next slide. So in the conclusion, ensuring journalists' freedom of expression is in question in the current political environment in Ethiopia. Journalists and other people critical of the government or the ruling party have been facing many risks. Many journalists have been taken jail, harassed, and forced to leave the country. Currently, around 15 journalists are under arrest. Even their cases were not taken to the court. Next slide. And while there are good laws that can support the freedom of the press and the freedom of expression, the executive body is not interested in implementing them in practice. Moreover, the executive body is either intentionally or unintentionally violating the press freedom and in the country. As a result, the freedom index in the country declined immediately in 2023. For information, in 2018, Ethiopia was in 150 rank, and in 2019, it was it improved by 14 countries, and it was 110. Then after that, in 2020 and 2021, it was 99 and 101. However, in 2030, radically changed. That means it is in 130 countries. But I have seen a report yesterday that Ethiopia is now in 140 ranks, which is a very devastating thing. For your information, just I will conclude in 30 seconds. Yesterday, the 18 countries ambassadors, they sent a kind of press release in connection with World Press Freedom Day, and they criticized the Ethiopian government and requested the Ethiopian government to make the media environment free. However, the government immediately sent a very strong and warning message to these embassies who are sending their strong message just to make the media environment free. So these days, it's not only the media, it's not only the journalists, it's not only the political active people, but also, other people, other international organizations like people who are working in the embassy are facing some kinds of threat because of they are sending their thoughts. The last slide. Yes, in general, the prevalence of conflict in the country frustrated the government and wanted to control the media sector to use them as a propaganda machine or pressurizing them to silence. I've seen close to 97 journalists were killed in Gaza. In Ethiopia, 2 journalists were killed so far. But I can say that almost all the journalists in Ethiopia are killed in a silent way. So they are not writing, they are not reporting, they are not reflecting their ideas. So there are different forms of killing than that is in Ethiopia. I want to stop here. Thank you for giving me this chance. If you have questions or any kinds of objections, I'm here to reflect. Thanks again.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. Now we have 15 more minutes for a discussion. And I wanted to take the freedom of asking you a question like you all, because I find it very interesting, like the diverse approaches you've had to the issue of traumatic events in journalism. I wanted to ask you, maybe you can answer voluntarily, like whoever wants to start. I wanted to ask, in the contexts that you have studied, how would you say that the civil support to journalists works? For example, because I think this is an important component on, like, maybe not exactly on well-being, like individual well-being, but it can become a force to support the journalists and their willingness to continue being journalists in contexts that are like very adverse. I wanted to know if there is a massive civil support to journalist work, if they are discredited, maybe, if there is trust, and if the media is still like a place to which citizenship likes to look forward to know about the truth and what is going on. I don't know if anyone would like to start.
Can you paraphrase the question?
All right, I wanted to ask that in the context that you have presented for your presentations, would you say there is a civil support to journalists, or is there not?
Yeah, I can reflect these issues by taking Ethiopia as a case. We can see some civil supports from many sectors, for instance, from international and local NGOs, which are working to strengthen the Ethiopian media to be very effective in reporting issues. Yes, just to report stories, investigative issues. I have seen lots of support that establish a coalition of journalists in Ethiopia. I have seen so many journalism associations are working in strengthening the capacity building of the journalists. For your information, currently there are around 27 journalism associations in Ethiopia, but the problem is how far they are strong enough, how far they are legitimate enough, how far they are strong in terms of finance, in terms of capacity, in terms of moral. So I have been working lots of projects in Ethiopia, and what I want to inform you that while there are interests to support the Ethiopian media, interests coming from civil societies, for instance, to strengthen the Ethiopian the media. However, I couldn't see a visible change in the media sector because the political environment is controlling everything. So everything is determined the political economy of the country. So even though the number of journalists are increasing, the number of journalism associations are increasing, the number of international organizations which are supporting the Ethiopian media and the journalism practice, the result cannot be immediately seen. That's why many journalists are forced to leave. That's why the point that I mentioned earlier, the politics, the ardent interests of the government to control the media and the political environment pressurized not only the journalists but also the other sectors. At this moment, the civil organizations which are interested in supporting the Ethiopian media are not in a good mood. They are frustrating. As I mentioned in my presentation, around 18 embassies, they just sent the press release to the media yesterday, and immediately the government reflected its strong views. It's a kind of warning to the embassies, just you must be silent. So you can see how the government interest is very massive to control not only the media environment, but also the political environment. So it's very difficult to say ensuring human rights, ensuring democracy, and ensuring freedom of expression would be allowed by the support of these civil societies and the media sector, unless the political environment is changing in the country. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I saw that Lauratu had raised her hand.
Yeah. No?
We can see you.
Can you
We
hear
can
me?
see you. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. What the last speaker has said, in Nigeria particularly, if you look at the civil support that you just mentioned, I think in the previous years, we've seen a lot of organizations coming to train journalists. In fact, organizations like the British BBC, for instance, the EU-funded project where I work particularly, and then the civil society organization, you see them trying to support journalists in terms of training, providing them with some kind of support that will allow them to conduct their work in a more effective way. But currently, I will not say the same thing. For instance, the last of support in this generation or in this kind of the years that we are currently, I think journalists are just left by, to themselves and their media organization. So that support is the National Assembly members, as our legislatures, for instance, when you talk about journalism with them, it's not something that they're interested in. And it goes a long way with the government, because as of yesterday, we saw how a lot of conferences were held just to mark this International War Freedom Day. And the media, the government was quick to say that there has been no coverage, but the data are out there for all of us to see that even in this present government, a lot of journalists have been detained. And this is a new government that came in to promise Nigerians and the journalists that we're going to provide you with a lot of support. But this is an opposite situation. We're not seeing that support currently in Nigeria. So it's really and coming to say that the civil society organization do not see the need for them to even support them as they should be, or as it used to be in some years ago. And that's just, I wanted to add to what the last speaker said, even though this is Nigeria, but it's just a similar case. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I saw a comment in the chat, and Ms. Rasha saying that her internet is not stable. I don't know if you want to comment anyway with the camera off, it's okay.
Okay, yeah, I can comment according to my research. As I told you, there is no care for the lives of journalism, of journalists, let alone the freedom of journalism. So I guess the freedom of journalism, since we are this event trying to remember that there was something called freedom of journalism that doesn't exist anymore. One facet of killing this freedom or ending this so-called freedom is killing the journalists, arresting them, putting all the obstacles for them in Gaza and in so many authoritarian countries, by the way. It happens even if not in conflict zone, but it's definitely not in the same pace or capacity that has been happening in Palestine in the last few months. So this is the situation we are in. Yeah. I don't know if you have any questions, anything specific you're asking about. I don't know.
No, that was very much it. I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah,
I have one question in the audience. I have a question. Over here.
Okay.
What's your name?
My name is Claudia Rivera. I work in El Salvador, and I work for an organization who protects journalists. I work for IREX, but I would like to know what is the effort in psychosocial support that organizations are providing versus other kind of protection like physical or digital. So is the psychosocial support important for the organizations?
May you paraphrase the question because I really can't grasp.
Yeah, she wants to know exactly which types of psychosocial supports are given. Like, is there therapy? Is there group talking discussions? Like, what exactly is being done in the context you studied? Yo.
Well, I don't know if there are groups of therapy for the horrors that journalists face in conflict zones, but there should be after the conflict such a thing, basically, because the journalists, and actually not just the journalists, the civilians who face such a conflict with all its horrors, will need psychological support, definitely. And I believe there are some activists in Egypt taking care of that with the Palestinians who came in the last few, in the last months, actually, or in the last few months, I would say. However, yet the great majority are still in Gaza, are still facing death, and we don't know yet when this is going to stop. IOs, NGOs, I believe, according to the initial findings that I have got, are quite helpless. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your words and also for this research. I want to give the word to Mulato.
Yeah, I can say a couple of words. Yeah. In the last, I can say the last 3 years, there were severe conflicts in the country. Still, the war is going on, but I want to mention some cases that were happening a year ago. The war between the TPLF and the Ethiopian government, which resulted in the loss of 1.2 million people in 2 years period. In this period, journalists were in the field, in the war front, just to report the war, and they have seen not only the war front, but also they have seen the brutal happenings in the war front. They have seen dead bodies, they have seen mutilated bodies, etc., etc. Even the people in that area, they have been exposed to so many traumatized events. For instance, women were harassed and raped in gang raping was happening. Soldiers were raping women, even mothers, elder peoples were raped. So people were traumatized in that particular area. However, in terms of providing psychosocial support, what I want to tell you is I haven't seen any kinds of support or any organization that can provide such kinds of support. When I was in Ethiopia, I just developed a kind of proposal to train journalists in the first thing, just to make them free from the trauma. The second thing, just to shape their reporting, not to harm those traumatized people in that particular area. But unfortunately, I was also forced to leave the country, and now I am in Norway. So I quite agree the importance of the psychosocial support. I quite agree the importance of trainings that can heal the journalists from their traumatic events. However, I couldn't see any NGOs or international organizations that are providing such support. In general, the government just closed so many things, so it's very difficult to the organizations to provide such kinds of support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes for the intervention of Esme. I'm sorry if it's very short, but go on.
All right, so if you don't mind, I would like to speak to the first question, Valkyria's question, with regards to the study, our study. So here in Ghana, what is happening is that press freedom is nothing much to boast about. We have seen, we continue to see several attacks on investigative journalists, in fact, journalists in general. And an example is even the 2019 gruesome murder of Ahmed Hussein. And up till now, there is so much impunity as well. So up till now, nothing has been done by the government. However, there are organizations such as the Ghana Journalists Association and the Independent Broadcasters Association, and also the Media Foundation for West Africa, who are really working and committed to fight for the freedom of journalists in this country. And some of them also are organizing trainings from time to time for journalists and students. And even Manasseh Azuri Awuni, who is the main focus of our study, is also collaborating with universities to train student journalists who are now, wanting to join the journalism profession, and encouraging them to try and venture into investigative journalism, so that this form of corruption and press, freedom that we can't realize can be finally realized, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all for your interventions, and especially for covering this issue. I mean, I personally know it's very important, and I'm being forced to retire, so the time has expired, so we must leave this panel now. We thank the speakers and all those who have joined us both in person and remotely. We invite you to review the conference program and attend some of the interesting panels that follow. Thank you very much for your participation, and this is off script, but I will send you an email later with some other resources that I have on this, and also to you. So yes, I will keep in touch, and until next time, thank you very much.